All right, let's go on. We're in Parshas Nitzavim. So we are on Perek Chaf Tes Pasuk Tes Zayin, 29:16. 29:16, which is on page 1086 still. So here, the Torah says a very interesting insight from the Meforshim. Torah says what Moshe Rabbeinu's concerns. I'm backing it up 5 lines from the bottom. Moshe Rabbeinu's concern. Ki atem yadatem es asher yeshavnu be'eretz Mitzrayim. You know that we were in the land of Egypt. Ve'es asher avarnu b'kerev hagoyim asher avartem. And you know that we passed among these goyim. And remember, yesterday we mentioned that this is a concern from 40 years ago. Vatiru es shikutsehem. You saw their, how does the article translate? You saw their abominations, meaning the, a sheketz is really some sort of like a sheretz, and a sheketz is a reptile-ish type creature, which is gross. You saw their abominations, referring to the idol worship. Ve'es gilu lehem, other forms of idols. Eitz va'evan, wood and stone. Kesef v'zav, silver and gold, gods made out of wood and stone, silver and gold, asher imahem, which are with them. Now, Rashi here says that, well, the wood and stone idols, they left out and exposed in the open. But kesef v'zav, the gold and silver ones, asher imahem, they kept those under lock and key. Right, God Shmad, you know, these are what do you call it? These are idols, but they're gold. You know, we're not leaving our gold idol out there, which then begs the question: if you got to protect your God, so why are you worshiping it? The God can't even protect itself. That's the silliness of it. So that's it. Now there are commentators that say that Eitz va'evan alludes to the religions that have been with us in the world all the time, which are Christianity and Islam, because Eitz represents the cross, which is made out of wood. And remember, I told you that Yoshka was a hockey player, right? Because he got nailed into the boards, right? So what do you call it? And there's another there and some say he was penalized for cross checking, but okay, so Eitz represents the yeah, that's fine. Truth I have no problem with. What can I tell you? The guy was an illegitimate child, what we call a mamzer, and the entire story that he was born from, he was born from the virgin birth, is all, it's all a bunch of nonsense, and it's a misinterpretation of the verses that they've distorted, because it says the young woman, it says the Alma will give birth, which Alma does not mean a virgin. Alma means the young lady, and yes, young ladies are the ones who usually give birth. Right? It's rare that old ladies give birth. So that's just a distortion, a Christian distortion. So Eitz, according to some, represents the religion of the wood. And by the way, I told you that even there is a discussion among the commentators, because there's a difference between Catholics and Protestants, because the Catholic cross has the image of a man on it. The Catholic cross has the image of the guy nailed to the cross, and the Protestant cross does not. The Protestant cross does a cross. So there is some discussion about whether the Catholic cross is for sure an idol, because it's got that image on it. The Protestant cross, without the image of the man, there is a discussion whether or not it is it's simply a symbol of the religion, or it's actually a religious, it's an idol. There is a discussion there. Either way, we're allergic to it at any stretch of the imagination, and we avoid any sort of crosses. That's why if you're in Hebrew, in the frum schools, they make a plus sign. Have you ever seen a plus sign in the frum schools? It looks like this. They make a plus sign like this. The opposite of a komatz in what do you call it? They do not make the plus sign the way we make the plus sign, because, what's that?
The letter T.
The letter T. The letter T is fine, because it doesn't go up on the top. They make an inverted, in schools they make an inverted T. No, this, this, well, they do, in Israel it's in Hebrew, but there's some people who actually make their T's that looks exactly like a cross that we don't do. We try not to do. What I do with my T's, I try when I'm writing in English, which I usually do, is I try to at least do it on an angle. So it shouldn't look too much like a cross. The stone represents Islam, because they have that big rock in Mecca, which they have to make a pilgrimage of. I've spoken to Arab cab drivers. You know, they have the halacha is that once in a lifetime they have to go to Mecca, where their holiest spot, and because you know, there are a lot of hotels in Mecca that make a lot of money off of this, and they have to go up. They go to Mecca, and then in Mecca there's a celebration. There's a giant rock in Mecca, not giant. It's a few stories high. And at the end of the worship is they walk around this rock, I think 7 times. They do hakafas, and while they're doing that, they throw stones at this big rock, which once in a while misses and hits people on the other side, which is fine. But the what do you call it? And they're usually many times they what do you call it? So that stone, I just read recently that even that originated with idol worship, even though the Muslims are not idol worship, the Muslims are monotheists. And that's one of the blessings that God gave us, is that the Muslims and Christians hate each other. You know, the problem was always that when the Christians rode to Jerusalem, the Crusades, to go fight the Muslims, they killed Jews on the way. That was always, you know, the Jews always got caught in the crossfire. That was the problem. But one of the blessings that we have is that when they're busy fighting with each other, they can't fight with us, or they'll at least take their focus off of us for a little while. You got Iran is against the United States, which is a good thing. It kind of just a little slightly diverts their attention. And then the Muslims themselves, and this you could ask Rabbi Madelon about, he's an expert in Islam. I think he's fluent in Arabic. Right? I mean, my goodness, a person would say, you know, how to even go and learn a language like that. But you know, okay, you know, I was a phys ed major, but okay. So he, among the Muslims, you got the Shiite Muslims, and the Sunnis. And the Shiites and Sunnis hate each other more than they hate Jews, because they claim, I think the Shiites claim that the Sunnis are not actually Muslims. So, and it can't be settled. It's not something that they can, so they settle it with weapons. That's how they settle the argument, like husbands and wives. So the Shiites and Sunnis actually hate each other. And Rabbi Ovadia Yosef, when the civil war began in Syria, they've been going at it for about 10 years. I never was ever able to figure out they got about 5 different factions there, all fighting with each other. But when originally the civil war began, so Rabbi Ovadia Yosef, he gave a bracha. He gave a bracha that both sides should be successful. That's what he said. Hatzlacha l'shneim. That's what he said. And I have a sneaking suspicion that Israel probably figures out some way to just keep them supplied with bullets and weapons, you know, so that they stay active with each other. So that's a bracha. We have to appreciate the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu keeps them, because they wouldn't be busy with each other. They'd be looking for us. So we have to appreciate it. So that's what some of the commentaries say. But one of the Farshim here says that what's the attraction of the Avodah? He breaks up the pasuk differently. He says like this: Vatiru es shikutzeim ves gilulehem eitz va'evan. You'll see their idols of wood and stone. And then what's going to tempt you is that you'll think that as a result of their idol worship, then it'll be kesef v'zahav asher imahem. You'll think that their prosperity of having gold and silver is a result of the idol worship. That's the danger, that's the mistake. Because you're going to read the map, you say, well, these guys are idol worshipers, and they're doing very well financially, and therefore, that's going to be the temptation. That's how some of the commentaries break up before should break up the pasuk. Either way, Moshe Rabbeinu is saying, you have to stay away from it. Now, the other idea here is that just when it comes to gold and silver, by the way, you know, there's a statement in the Talmud Yerushalmi made by Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan lost some money, and he was a little depressed. And Rish Lakish saw Rabbi Yochanan, and he said, what happened? And he said he lost his wallet, he lost his money. And then he made the famous statement. He said, Kol ha'evarim tiluyim balev. All of your limbs are dependent on your heart. V'halev tolui bakis, and your heart is dependent on your pocket, right? Which is a very interesting insight into human nature. That you know, payday, people are in a much better mood. You know, I told you, statistically, I would imagine more kids in the world get spanked on a day that the stock market is down than when the stock market is up. Daddy comes home in a much better mood when the stock market is down. You know, my father used to monitor the stock market, and every once in a while I watch him and he go, darn it, That's when I knew better get out of the room now. Time to leave. Oh well, yeah, I'm going to go do some homework now. So, he never took it out on me, but it's true. And I know myself. When all of a sudden there's a pinch, and it's not even. Just this morning, my wife asked me for some cash, and I have money in the bank. I don't have cash. I'm stressed, and I'm already like, which means I have to give it a credit card, right? And then you wonder why I have hives, right? Why am I breaking up? Why have I got a rash? Why am I nervous? She's out right now with my credit card. So if I'm a little tense, or if you see me, drinking some Jack Daniels, you'll know why. That's the reason. So that's human nature. That's human nature. Okay. Now take a look at the next pasuk. Then Moshe Rabbeinu goes like this. He says the following. Pen yesh bachem isho isha, perhaps there's among you a man or a woman, 2 lines from the bottom. O mishpacha or shevet, or a family or a tribe. Asher levovo pone hayom me'im Hashem. Maybe there's somebody among you whose heart straying after Hashem. Lolech elokedu, loleches lavod es Elohei hagoyim, to go worship those gods. Pen yesh bachem shoresh pore rosh vilana. Maybe there is among you how does the arts go to a rotten, a root flourishing with gall and wormwood. In other words, a rotten root. Maybe there's a rotten egg here somewhere. And the Mefarshim say why it's compared to a root is because a root is hidden under the dirt. The root of a tree is hidden under the dirt. Sometimes there's somebody who externally everything looks good. There's something rotten under the surface over there. And maybe somebody is here lurking among us who's got some rotten ideas underneath. Now, if you know anything about the beginning of the Reform movement, Moshe Mendelssohn, who was the innovator of Reform, he was an Orthodox Jew. You could eat at his house; everything was kosher. But he wrote a translation of the Chumash in German, in order to be able to ostensibly to be able to reach other people. And the Gedolim of the generation, they saw it and they smelled with their Torah sensitivities. They said something's rotten over here. And the end of the story was that he has his children intermarried. He has no Jewish grandchildren. That all came from him, who then became an outlaw. He rebelled against the Torah faithful. How did they know? They could smell it. They could see it. They could sense it based on the way he was writing. And if we would have looked at it, we'd say, very nice, very nice translation. But there was something lurking under the surface. And that's what Moshe Rabbeinu is concerned here. That maybe there's a rotten. Now, if you take a look at the last 4 words of the pasuk, so first of all, it's interesting you got the word rosh in there. Shoresh, pore, rosh, vilana. What did I tell you? When does this reading usually come around? Rosh Hashanah time, right? So it has the word rosh. But even more remarkable is if you take a look at the first 4 letters. Shin, Pei, Resh, Vav. The first 4 letters of those last 4 words. Each word. Shin, Shoresh, Pore, Pei. Second line from the top. Shofar. If you're religious, it spells the word shofar. Right? There's the allusion to the shofar that comes around the Rosh on Rosh Hashanah. What's the connection here, though? Why is it alluded to right in the pasuk that's talking about people who are rotten? Why is there, of all places, I would put it in something where Torah talks about the reward that we get in the world of God. Why is shofar alluded to over here? Why is shofar alluded? What's that?
Does it have something to do with the Satan?
It's certainly, you're close, you're warm. Why is shofar alluded to in a pasuk that's talking about people being miserable and being rebellious? Why does it talk about the shofar? The answer is that what's a shofar supposed to do?
Shrink the fear of God.
What's that?
Give you the fear of God.
Of course. That means a person could be off, and hearing the shofar could inspire a person back to do tshuva. That's why it's alluded to over here. What does the word shofar come from? You know the word shofar, shufra in Aramaic, means beauty. The shofar, the sound of the shofar, is meant to arouse us. We spoke yesterday about the idea of subliminal suggestion, remember? I'm listening to the sound of the shofar. I would love to tell you that I heard the shofar, and the next thing I do is I just gave a whole lot of tzedakah, and I just became the best Jew in the world. Does it affect us? Well, yeah, to a certain extent it affects us, but we don't know how it's affecting us. Now, one of the tricky issues that people have over here, first of all, what is the sound? What are the sounds of the shofar supposed to represent? There are different ideas of the shofar. Rosh Hashanah is the coronation of the king. And I found personally that in certain ways Yom Kippur is an easier day than Rosh Hashanah. Why is that? It's obviously an intense day and it's a fasting and everything else. Rosh Hashanah, we're doing two things. Number one, you're in shul, you're davening, you're thinking about God, making God the king, Hashem Melech, Hashem Molech. Then you leave shul and what do? You go and you eat. That means we're in the spiritual world and we're in the physical world at the same time. And that can be very tricky because you can be very spiritual for 4 or 6 hours in shul, and then you come back to a table full of good food. It's a very difficult and very tricky balance. Whereas Yom Kippur, you detach, total detachment. Right? It's like a person going cold turkey. It's much easier to quit cigarettes going cold turkey than it is to smoke 6 a day. 6 becomes 7, 7 becomes 8, 8 becomes 10, 10 becomes 2 packs. It doesn't last. Cold turkey, that's it. It's just that's not on the radar anymore. Do you know that many Jews who smoke, I'm not advocating smoking by the way, but many Jews who smoke have no problem on Shabbos. Before I was married, I smoked. Before I was married. Then I got engaged. And after I got engaged, it wasn't fair. It was really, really not fair. It was like cheating almost. After I got engaged, so then she says to me, okay, it's either me or the cigarettes. So I said to her, well, give me 10 minutes to think. So she said, no, I'm not kidding. If we're going to stand under the same chuppah, you're not going to smoke. I said, well, I won't smoke under the chuppah. Yeah, I had to stop. Yeah, well, that's the way that's the way it works. Now, when what do you call it? From Jews never had trouble smoking. I smoked before I was married. I did not have any trouble on Shabbos. Why? For the same reason I don't have any trouble today with pork. You can put pork on a table. I could be on an airplane and they don't have my kosher meal. They'll put out pork. It's not even a test. Why? It's just not something we do. Right? If you put an idol on the table, none of us are going to worship an idol. I don't care how much money you're going to give it. We're not going to worship idols. It's not even a test. Shabbos, the minute Shabbos starts, I didn't even have the craving to smoke. Motzei Shabbos. Oh, my riv was fast, right? And then we light the cigarette off the Havdalah candle. Motzei Shabbos. And not only that, I remember as a little kid, before I even started smoking, I wasted all those years. As a little kid, before I started smoking, I remember seeing, I see these old guys from shul, they'd leave shul with a cigarette lit. We didn't even get home yet because they put a cigarette in their stender on Erev Shabbos. So they had one. You finished Mar, you said Atachon Antono, you're allowed to do. You could drive. They'd be already smoking on the way out from Mar. So it's not even a test because it's not even on the radar. So what is Rosh Hashanah? So on Yom Kippur, food's not even on the radar. It's hard, it's fasting, it's intense. And by the way, it's a happy day. It's not a sad day. Tisha B'Av's a sad day. Tisha B'Av's a day of warning. Yom Kippur is a day where we're getting a reprieve in court. It's a very happy day. It's an intense day. Rosh Hashanah is a very difficult balance. I want to be intense and I want to be focused, but then you got to come home and sit at a table with your family, especially a young family where kids are spilling wine on each other. And you got to deal with that. All of a sudden, it's like they used to say in the shopping. Do you ever hear in the shopping? You go shopping, and all of a sudden you hear Carol Domestics, aisle 6. Right? That's what happens when you come home from shul. Kaplan Domestics. So all of a sudden I'm back into domestics now, where I used to be. Where at one point I was just in shul bringing down malachim and angels and spirit. And I got to come home, and you got to deal with this. I find Rosh Hashanah. However, what are we doing? And this makes it easier. If you realize that Rosh Hashanah is all about declaring Hashem as the king, Hashem Melech, Hashem Molech, Hashem Imloch. So first of all, the shofar, right? Whenever there's a king, they always blow the trumpet. That's part of the coronation of the king. And if you go to the meal, and you see the meal as you're at the inaugural ball, right? The president becomes inaugurated. They have the inaugural dinner. So what happens at dinner? All the dignitaries are there. Imagine the Queen of England, or now it's the King of England, and they have, he's got a big fancy meal with the ambassador from Australia and the Duke of something or other, and they're all sitting at the meal. They eat like, it's very, very respectful, dignified. There's no crunching on, there's no buffalo wings, crunch. It's a very, some dish with a French EAUX in there somewhere, and that's how, because it's a dignified. So that's what Rosh Hashanah meal is. The Rosh Hashanah meal is the coronation. It's the inaugural ball for Hashem being coronated as the king. That's the Rosh Hashanah meal. That's how we see Rosh Hashanah. The shofar, at one level, is, the king is entered. That sort of thing. And by the way, I heard a story that's unbelievable. My brother told me a story years ago. There was a guy, a Jewish businessman from Morocco, a from guy. From Jewish businessman. He had a partner in France who was not Jewish. So he flew to France for I made a bracha before. He flew to France for a meeting with his French partner. And the guy says to him, Yaakov, I'd like you to come to my house for dinner tonight. He says, Jacques, I told you I can't, I only eat kosher food, I can't. He says, no, I ordered a kosher meal for you already. It's double sealed, I haven't touched it, I haven't opened nothing. But it's in your best interest to come over tonight because the king of Morocco is going to be a guest at my house. These are big businessmen. So he says to him, oh, okay, that's something else. So he comes to the house, and so Jacques seats him next to the king of Morocco. So they start schmoozing. King of Morocco's a nice guy. They start schmoozing. And the king of Morocco says to him, you're an Orthodox Jew. I've always wondered, I've heard there's something called a bar mitzvah. What's a bar mitzvah? So he says to him, a bar mitzvah, a Jewish boy becomes 13. There's a celebration. He takes on responsibility. He says, as a matter of fact, my own son was bar mitzvah about 2 weeks ago, my son, and we had a big celebration. King says, really? I'd like to give him a gift. He says, no, Excellency, it's not necessary. He says, no, I insist. He pulls out his checkbook. He writes out a check, slides it across the table. The guy picks it up, 40,000 euros. So he looks at it, he says, Excellency, thank you very much. This is way excessive for a bar mitzvah. Wait, he said, why so much? He gives him this kind of cocky, confident smile. He goes, I'm the king. Less than that I don't give. Right? So there's a very important lesson here. The first lesson is that when you have a family celebration, make sure to invite the king of Morocco. That's the first lesson. That's really the most important lesson here. But the real lesson here is that if a king of flesh and blood can give 40, doesn't give less than Kodesh Baruch Hu is the king. Kodesh Baruch Hu also wants to give, and he can give more. You give everything that we want. And every single person wants something on Rosh Hashanah. We all have a laundry list of needs. There's Banei, Chaye, Umezoneh. You know what those three things stand for? Banei is children, which means family life, means having children, having good children, finding a shidduch so you can have children. Banei. Chaye is life, health. Mizone is parnasa, mizonos, food, parnasa. Everything we need falls into one, the material needs fall into one of these three categories. Either family needs, material needs, or or health needs. Those are all the needs that we have on Rosh Hashanah. So if we make Hashem the king, and we believe he's the king, and we show he's the king by doing what he wants us to do, so then HaKadosh Baruch Hu can give us much more than the king of Morocco. And then you don't have to eat a kosher airline meal. Right, you can eat a good meal, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu could give you whatever you want. But we have to make sure that we acknowledge Hashem as the king. How do we acknowledge he's the king? We acknowledge he's the king by doing. Kings don't make requests. Kings give orders. If we relate to the obligations that we have as orders, Hashem's giving us orders. You have a Shulchan Aruch. It's a halacha that you could do, that you can't do, that you must do. Then the more we relate to Hashem as the king, so the more we can then make a request, and hopefully the king will fulfill our request. That's the first idea of the shofar. The second idea of the shofar is listen to the sounds it makes. There are three basic sounds. There's a tekiah, there's a shvarim, and there's a truah. According to some, that represents 3 levels of crying, 3 levels of tears. So imagine a guy who drops a 16-pound bowling ball on his own foot. Well, what's the first sound you're going to hear? That's right. Oh! Right? Like, oh! Right? And then it's going to be, oh! Right? Then, that's what the shofar is. right? Tkiya. That's what the shofar is. The shofar reminds us of a contrite heart that we should. Okay, you don't have to cry. You don't have to cry. You don't have to. But it should remind us that we should kind of remind us. That's the subliminal aspect of it. Comes along the Torah and says, you know what a shofar does for you? A shofar can actually get you to change your focus. It can get you. It has an effect on us. I told you it's like vitamins that we spoke about yesterday. Number one. Number two. I think what you're going to grapple with, I get to ask this question every year, what should you think about while the shofar is being blown? Do you ever wonder about that? Shofar is being blown, and it's 100 times that it's blown, and you're listening, guy's blowing, what should I be thinking about? So, number one, you should think before anything else, I am about to fulfill a Torah command of hearing the shofar. That's the first thing you should fulfill. We're doing a mitzvah, with all the symbolism and all the spirituality after it. Before anything, the most spiritual thing we could do is fulfill a mitzvah. What's the mitzvah here? The mitzvah is to hear the shofar. I don't care what you're thinking about. I don't care if you're thinking about Yitzhak. It represents the Akedas Yitzhak because there was a ram the ram was in place of Yitzhak being shechted. So the ram's horn reminds Hashem it's the merit of the Jewish people that Avram Avinu did the Akedah, was willing to sacrifice his son, and it reminds us of the horn, the shofar that was blown at Har Sinai. The Torah. That's all wonderful. It's nice. It's terrific, and you should think about that. But the first thing to think about is, by the way, I'm doing a mitzvah here. First thing is I'm doing a mitzvah. It's like when you put on tefillin, the first thing you thought before you put on your tefillin is I'm about to do a mitzvah of putting on tefillin. It also represents the badge of honor from Hashem that we're wrapping Hashem in. That's all wonderful. That's great. You should think about that. But first thing is I'm about to fulfill a Torah command of hearing the shofar. This year, by the way, only one day because it's Shabbos. Because the Torah shofar comes out on Shabbos. The first day of Rosh Hashanah comes out on Shabbos, and the Rabbanan said not to blow shofar on Shabbos. Why? You might carry the shofar. You might carry the shofar for Amos. You might carry the shofar, and therefore the what do you call it? The Rabbanan at the koach that they have, they say the risk is not worth worth the game, right? The risk of forgetting and carrying a shofar. Therefore, we do not blow the shofar on Shabbos when Rosh Hashanah comes out on Shabbos. We read the verses that surround the shofar, but we don't actually blow the shofar. Number one. Number two. My favorite, it was probably my favorite Rosh Hashanah story of all time, was a guy came to Rav Nosson Tzvi Finkel Zatzal, the Rosh Yeshiva, the Mir Yeshiva, and he said, what should I think about while the shofar is being blown? So he looked at me and said, think about other people. That's my favorite story. You could think about the Akedah and you could think about her. Say, how about thinking about other people a little bit? That could be he knew this guy had trouble with thinking about other people. That's why he said it. But it is a lesson for us. Not to forget, like I always tell you, not only vertical religion, there's horizontal religion also. Right? It affects people. It affects people as well. By the way, there's another guy there was an English tourist who went to a Swiss tourist went to Thailand. Went from Switzerland to Thailand. And he was in a bar. This happened years ago. He was in a bar, and he apparently had a bit too much to drink, so they threw him out of the bar. So the guy was ticked off. So he took a can of spray paint, and he defaced the picture of the king of Thailand. They have a picture of the king all over. He defaced the picture of the king of Thailand. He graffitied the picture of the king of Thailand. Well, he was on trial with a maximum possible sentence of 75 years in jail. Listen, he's the king. And so they went easy on him and sentenced him to 10 years in jail for spray painting a king. Can you imagine if they would do that in New York? Right? There'd be no spray paint anywhere. Right? Nothing would be graffitied. Right? So they sentenced him to 10 years in prison. Then the king of Thailand gave him a pardon. He pardoned him. The guy got on the first plane possible, flew back to Switzerland, and took Thailand off his bucket list. No more visiting Thailand. Right? So what's the lesson? The lesson is if that's how a person treats a king of flesh and blood, you can get 75 years. So if a person is disrespectful to God, remember I told you, and what is the average lifespan anyway? It's 75 years for men. And women outlive men, by the way. Women live longer than men. Right? The latest statistics, I think, the average life expectancy for a woman is about 78 years, and for a man it's 74 years. Right? That's the average life expectancy. They did a study once. They found that married men live longer than single men, but married men are more willing to die. What do you call it? The average lifespan says 75 years in a lifetime. 80 years, the imbig gvuros shmoni, you make it to 80. And some guys make it to 90, but I got news for you. All those life plans, all those things you were planning when you were young to do when you retire, oh yeah, I'll do that when I retire. I got news for you. Harpooning off the coast of Nova Scotia is no longer on the agenda when you're 85 years old. 85 years old is basically going to find out the best denture adhesives that you could find. That's what happens at 85. So if a person is disrespectful to the King of Thailand, imagine what is disrespectful to Ribbon Shalom. That's what Rosh Hashanah is about. But think about other people too, not to get caught up in the trampling other people for the sake of the cause. Okay, tell me. Yeah, go ahead.
When they blew the shofar for the walls of Jericho, which type of blowing was it?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. I think the Nach says that it just sound the shofar, and then the wall. By the way, the walls of Jericho did not fall. The walls of Jericho were absorbed into the ground because they were as wide as they were tall. They didn't fall over. They made very wide. It was very fortified, very strongly fortified. So they got swallowed into the earth. They didn't fall over. That's what most people think. He blew it and the walls crumbled, right? The walls didn't crumble. The Gemara says the walls were swallowed into the earth because the width of the wall, the thickness of the wall was as much as the height. Yeah, those were very thick walls. By the way, have you ever seen in the old city? Do you ever wonder why you go into Jaffa Gate? You go in and you make a left turn, or a right turn, whichever it is. You go in. You don't know why that is? Because apparently when they fortified a city, the danger is always that the guys with the battering ram are going to get a good running start and they're going to batter down the gates. So what they did is they build it this way. You go in and there's a stone wall ahead of you which you can't batter down. Then you got to make a turn. The doors are on the side, so you can't get any leverage. Right? And also all the way. If you look at the top of the walls, so they got cracks between that. You obviously know why, don't you? Yeah, for the guys, the archers and the guys, if somebody's like trying to storm the city, you got the guys on top with you. That would have been my job if I was in the ancient world. I wouldn't be one of the guys on the ground with clubs. I would be up there. It's much safer. And then also you get to pour boiling hot oil on people, which is what they used to do when they try to storm the walls. You pour the boiling hot oil. I'm just wondering about the invading army. Antonio, you're going up. Why me? I did it last time. Look, I got third-degree burns over here from last time. What do you go? Let somebody else go up there now. Why's it gotta be me? Let Frankie go up there. Why me? And the guy in the wall said, come on, make my day. Give me that thing. And down goes the oil. So that's just that's a historical fact. Okay, take a look at Pasuk Yud Ches. V'hoya. Now they're addressing this rotten egg. Now we're addressing this guy, this rotten, this sour root. V'hoya b'shamo es divrei ha'olah hazos. He'll hear this curse. All right, you know what? Leave this for next time because I want to speak about this. We'll leave it. We'll keep it over here. Okay.